Let me review what type of program we have already learned in the previous video tutorial. We have created this Hello World Java program which displays different types of values. The first value which we have displayed is of course the very famous Hello World message, and then we had the second message and the third, which are of type string. This string should be enclosed in double quotes. We also have displayed a integer value which is not needed to be enclosed in double quotes because anyway it's a numeric value, and another type of numeric value which is of with decimal point. We also have a character value which is enclosed in single quote. If it's a string, you enclose it with double quotes. If it's a character, you enclose it with a single quote. Now let's try to create another program. Look at this. I have already created one. If I have already created a project before, if I'm going to create a new one, you just go to File and then New File, or you can click Control N or New. So I have here my new file dialog box. We can in fact have a Java class immediately, so we can have a Java class to create. Let's create another simple program which will already have some variables. So I click on Java here, I click on Java class file, it's the same, or you can create a Java class file. So click on that and then click on next, and you have already here the class name. So this class is going to have a variable, so can I just have here variable or sample? I can have here sample of variables because I'm going to introduce you here about variables in Java. So I have sample variables, so it's going to be included in our same project last time, that's Hello World, and then the same location, it will be there in our Java program folder inside SCC. Just follow the path there and then click on next. You will not have that one which was already created for you, this one, public static void main. If you don't have that, you just simply type it, but the package name and other things are also there. In fact, you can remove that if you wish to, so that it won't be a disturbance for you. So public static void main, and then I will have my string arguments. You remember what's this one, the arguments, because it's a string. This was put here in the first example. You can put the square bracket here, or you can put it here, no problem. Okay, you can see this is insisting to be included, incorrect package, so we can just include that package because it's giving me an error. So you have here public is static void main. It's expecting double quotes. Why? It's expecting semicolon, maybe because we don't have yet our begin and end. Since we have already our begin and end, we do not have that error here anymore. Do we have any error? In fact, if you are to run this one, you will have already no debugging error. It will build, but it will not have an output. When will you be able to see an output? If you are to display. Let's review what is the display method which we have studied last meeting. System.out.print. See, it's having an intelligence. So you can have print or print line. I can have println. So I will have here programs with variables. I can just have here my label sample2. So this is now our sample2 for variables. So we can have now variables and types here, variables and data types. Before I proceed, what are variables in Java? In all programming languages, variables are very necessary. It's very important. Why? Because our main purpose of creating a program is to process data. And for us to process data, we need to save data. To save data, one way or a temporary storage is to save them or to write them in a variable. A variable is a temporary storage of data. For example, you would like to calculate the total marks of student. Say the student have quiz mark and the student will have ID number, the student will have name, the student will have midterm mark. All of this must be stored in a variable so that later on you can always retrieve and process these values. What about data types? If you are to declare a variable because you are going to save value, values will be saved differently. There will be different types. There will be different kinds of values. The values may be of numeric. The values may be of string, similar to our previous program. You see, what are the types of values we are displaying here? These are string type. This is a numeric type. This is a floating point type or real number type, and this is a character type. So in the same way, if we are to store it in a variable, then we should determine what kind of values are being stored in that variable you are declaring. So for this example, I'm going to present to you different types of variables. What are the different data types you can store or save in your variable? And of course, how do we declare a variable? How do we use them? When do we use them? To use them is, of course, to store a value. We need variable declaration if we wish to store a value. For example, this one here, I have my name or I have my ID number. Let's start with this simple value. I have here my ID number. I would like to store this as temporarily to be 30628. It's temporary value. So I would like to store my temporary ID number because later on I might use it for another staff also. And another staff will have a different ID number. So that's why it's variables. The values can be changed. So maybe this time of the year I have 550 salary. But later on this salary may be 1,500 reals. So why not? It's going to be varied depending on the value at the time of execution. That's why it's called variable. It varies with the value. It depends on the data types you are declaring it to have or to handle. For example, I'd like to declare a variable to store this ID number. So, if I am going to declare a variable, what is the syntax? I am going to present this to you in our live sessions in the theory class. What are the different ways to declare a variable? What are the things you must remember when you are declaring a variable? So this is the practical side. Let me just give you the syntax. First, you have to write the types, followed by the, of course, the variable itself, or we call it as the variable name, followed by semicolon. This is what we call the variable declaration. So if you are to declare a variable, the syntax is you put the data type followed by the variable name. Let's put an example here. So for example, I would like to store that ID number which I have given here as 30628. So I will have to declare a variable to handle that. What's the variable name? Let's say I will name it as staff ID because that's a staff ID, or to make it faster, I can just have it as SID. SID stands for staff ID. That's the variable name. What's the variable name? SID. Now, what type of value I'm going to save in here? I'm going to save here an integer value. And then I'll put semicolon. Okay, what are the data types available? The data types available in Java are, these are the basic data types. This is an integer. An integer stores a numeric value, number without decimal point. These are whole number. Okay, so if you are to store a number with decimal point, you are going to use double. So in the meantime, let's stick to the first data type, which is introduced in the lecture session, which will be given in the lecture sessions. We have the int data type. So if I have the int data type, meaning to say what kind of value can I save or store in SID, I can store only numbers with no decimal point, similar to the one which we have given in here. Do we have decimal point here? No, we don't have. So we can assign this value as the value of my SID. How do we assign a value? This is only declaration. The second thing is, of course, we can assign a value. There are many ways you can put values on your variable. The first way is to assign values to variables. So how do we assign values to our variables? To assign values to our variables, you simply use the equation variable name equal to the value. Copy and paste this one. So I have variable name, and what's my value? 306028. So again, what's this one doing? This is an assignment statement. If you are to assign value, what do we use? We use only the equal sign. So there are two new steps here which I am giving you. The first one is the variable declaration. Okay? The second one is the assignment statement. What are we assigning? We are assigning values to our variable SID. Which variable we are assigning? We are assigning it to SID. What value are we assigning? We also call it as literal. What literal value we are assigning? A numeric literal, which is 30, 60, and 28. So first step is to declare the variable. Second step is for you to put or assign value to your variable, which you have declared in here. In fact, we can write that in just single step. Okay? How do we write that in single step? You can simply put this declaration here. This is already assigning and declaring at the same time. So you see, I have a while ago, I have two lines, right? So let me put that undo. Let me show you. Let me show you again. What do we have? We have here line 1 and line 2. What are these two doing? This is declaring variable, and this is assigning value to our variable. We can do this in two different lines, or we can do this in one line only. How do we do that in one line? Let me put this in remarks so that this will not be considered by the compiler. To do this in one line, I may simply put this declaration. I shall copy that. So declaration first, I have in SID, meaning SID will be storing what type of value? Integer value. And then, look at this one. This is just repeating SID and then putting the value. I shall write this one. Why do I need to write SID two times? I will need to write it only once. So I have now the value and the declaration at the same time. What do we have in the declaration? Int SID. So I have here int SID. And then, what do we have in our assignment statement or assigning the values to your variable? I have SID equal to 306028. You can do it in two lines. Two lines are there to assign and declare variable, or you can simply have it in shortcut or single line, having the declaration and the assignment statement at the same time. So what is this? This is variable declaration, declare, and assign. So you are already declaring the variable and assigning value at the same time. Which one is easier for you? Which one you prefer is up to you. So we have already our first sample variable. What's the variable name we have given here? SID. And what's the data type we have used? The data type we have used is integer, meaning it will only store integer value or numbers with no decimal point. So if I put here 0.28, this is going to be wrong. Why? Because it allows you only to enter values with no decimal point. You might just as well use here double if you want to put point. So since we don't have decimal point, you just make use of int data type. Okay, now let's try to display this value. We want to display this value. For example, I want to display staff ID is 30628. So what do we use? Of course, we are going to use system.out.println. So system.out.println, let me put the message first, staff ID. So I will put, let's say, staff ID is. How do I write the value 30628 here? So I'll give you one new syntax of our system.out.println. This is combining two different types of value to be displayed in one single println method. How is that? If I want a text message or a string message like this one, it's a string, right? Staff space ID, and then I have colon, I have space. Now after putting this, I want to retrieve the value of my SID. I can simply put here 30628. But what's the use of the variable then? What if the ID number is different upon executing it again? Let's say it's another staff's ID number which I would like to process. Then it's not a variable anymore. So what shall we do with that? We can simply copy this and put it as variable. So what is this method doing? This method simply displays multiple types of value. This is a string value and you are concatenating it, combining it. You are not adding it. You are combining it to the value of your SID. If you put here SID, meaning you are retrieving the stored value in SID. What's the value you have assigned or stored or saved in SID? The value you have saved in SID is 306028. So it should display staff ID colon followed by 306028. Let's run and see our output. So upon running or executing our program, we have the output that shows whatever we have included in our println method. Of course, the first string output which we have here in our println method, it should display sample2 variables and type. Where is that? We have that here. And then moving on, we have declared here a variable which we have assigned the value, and then afterwards in line number 12 we have again another display method which will display whatever are the written arguments inside the parentheses. So we have here a message that says staff ID, so we have that here, staff ID, and then followed by the value of the SID. What's the value of the SID? The value of the SID is 30628. So we have here our first variable declared with the assigned value. So the variable name is of type int, and it's correct because we are assigning or storing here an integer value. There are other ways to display it. Is the format of the display always like this? You can also display directly the value. Like say you want to directly display SID, no problem with that. Just put here SID. If you are to display SID here, what will happen? This will only retrieve the value of the SID. What's the value of the SID? The value of the SID is 30628. So in this case, I am also presenting to you the three syntax of println method. The first syntax is this one. It's displaying a message. So if you are to display a message or directly the value, what shall you do? You have to enclose it with the double quotes. This is displaying a message. This is displaying a message with a value of a variable. And what about this one? This line number 13 will directly display the value. You don't need text message anymore. So let's see the output. So we'll have the output. I will run it in another way. Let's have the output. The output should show sample to variables and types, see that? And then the second print line method will show this output. So that's the one which is enclosed in double quotes, staff ID followed by the value of the variable which we have assigned here. And then again, we have retrieved the value of the variable by simply putting it as an argument to display inside the method print line. Okay, let me try to change this value. You might think that we have just manipulated it. Let's try to run it again. By the way, I'm debugging it here. Debug file. Okay, so it should change now. See that one? I have removed 0 here and 0 there. So we have now the two values changed because I have changed the values I have assigned here. That's the advantage of using a variable. Values can be changed. It's not fixed. It varies on what value you are assigning to it. It will vary on what values later on will be saved or will be stored in this particular variable. Let's try another type of data. What are the other type of data? Let's say I would like to display a string like this one, the name. Okay, I would like to display a string. A string is actually a special data type. It's a non-primitive data type. I will discuss to you about primitive and non-primitive data types in Java in our lecture, in our theory class. So in the meantime, let's just use string as our non-primitive data type here. As you observe, the primitive data types should be in blue color because they are keywords, but this one is not in blue color. So we have named our name as SName, where we are saving our name, my name Rubelin. That's what we have put here. You see that? I have here my name, so I'm just storing that in a variable, and then let me display that using this one. So I will just have to copy and paste this. So this should be a staff name now. Alright, so let's have a different label, and of course I would like to retrieve a different variable, that's SName. So let's try to run. Go to debug please, and then debug file or Control F5. So we have now our new value, another value that says staff name is Rubelin. Okay, can I remove this one now? If you want to remove so that it will not be included in the execution, you can put it in remarks. So later on, you can always play with this program and do something else, trial and error, until you become expert in Java programming. So let's run it again. We don't have this SID anymore. So I have sample 2 variables and types, staff ID 3628, and then you have staff name to be Rubelin. Okay, so we have already our second data type. Let's try another common data type. Let's have double, and then let's say salary. That salary I have put as, let's say, 550 and 200 Vaisa, just to put the point. And then let's display that. Alright, sorry, let me just copy this so we will be fast. I'm just copying. So let's copy and paste this here. So we have here our salary. So basic salary, let's put that as basic salary, and then I will have here the variable. So that you don't misspell it, you can always copy but then paste here so that you do not misspell the variable, because it's case sensitive also. For example, I have put this here as capital letter and I put here small letter. See, it will have an error. Why? Because you have declared the variable as salary, and then you are declaring it here or using it here as a small letter. So that will be wrong. Let me remove that and return it back again to small letter so that it will be consistent with the one I am using. All variables, you can put them in small letter. As a naming convention, they should be all in small letter, and class names are all in capital letters. More about this on the theory we are going to discuss. Now let me run this program, debug file, Control Shift F5, or go to debug and then debug file. So we have there now our 3 outputs or 4 outputs, because we have 4 print line, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have the heading, which is sample 2 variables and types. We have the staff ID, we have the staff name, and we have the staff salary. You can also have the character data type. Let's complete it all with all the data types, the basic data types. I can use here the car data type. So for me to be able to put the department code, let's declare a character data type, that's char, and then I will have the department code. So I will have my department code to be I. It's enclosed with single quote. Remember, if it's a string, it's enclosed in double quotes. If it's a character, please enclose it with single quote. Okay, and then let's display this value for my department code. So I can have here department code so that it's fast, so that you don't misspell it. Just simply copy and paste. There you have. Let's try to debug it again. Debug file. There you have the complete output already with all the basic data types, which is useful and which are important for you to understand. We have an integer value, which is the staff ID, which is declared here. We have also the string value, which is declared and processed here, displayed here. We have a double data type value, or value with decimal point, which is declared and assigned and displayed here. And the last one, the last basic data type, is a character data type, which we have enclosed with single quotes and displayed here. So those are the basic data types that all of you should learn before we proceed with other kinds of program. I hope you enjoyed this session. This session is about variables and data types. I am going to discuss more of this in our live sessions. Again, it's going to be in a theoretical pattern in which I'm going to teach you what are the things you should remember when you are writing or declaring a variables, and what are the other data types available in Java, because it's not only these 4 data types which are available. There are many other available data types which you can enjoy and use in Java programming language. So that's all for today's class. I hope you learned something today. Thank you for watching this video.